Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch, Serman, and I'm happy to have you join us today on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. For this show, we are going to be exploring a couple different things, but the whole show in general is intended to help you create some financial wellness because we are going to take different life cycles and we're going to explore them both financially and emotionally because your money is actually more about your emotions associated with your finances than the finances themselves. Although we're going to be somewhat general in our discussions, we would love to hear from you and make it more relevant and more personal. So please do call in. You can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial, or you can post your comments and questions on Facebook or YouTube, and we can try to address them live on the show. Often we hear societal cliches like, I am my own worst enemy. And I've heard that more than once dealing with people going through divorce. Or they will say things like, I just sabotaged myself again. Sometimes it's cliches, sometimes it's negative thoughts or comments. We think in concepts, not words. So we're able to think of hundreds of words in a minute. So for example, we don't say, I'm going to open the door, walk down the stairs, go to the mailbox, open the mailbox, etc. We say, I'm going to get the mail. And in about 3 seconds, we've probably covered 100 words already. One of my all-time favorite statistics, and yes, I'm a little bit of a geek sometimes when it comes to statistics, but my all-time favorite statistic that I read years ago is the average person thinks in a negative fashion about 60% of the time. 60% of the time. So just to put that in perspective, if you think more than half of the time in a negative way, like let's say 50%, or let's say 55%, you're actually still considered a positive person, even though you're thinking negatively more than half the time, because the average person is even more than that. That's a hard statistic sometimes to get your head around. Treating ourselves with respect and positively is absolutely vital to ourselves. And this is also a great way to role model for our children, especially through adversity, to show them a healthy way to live. Yes, they are always watching and they are always absorbing what we do. Today, I am really excited to have as my guest Jen Warren Medwin, and we are going to chat about how do you set the intention of speaking to yourself with respect in all areas of your life, socially, emotionally, and financially. We're going to ask a big question and try to solve it as, do you respect yourself? I almost feel like we should have Aretha Franklin playing in the background. Jennifer is a certified divorce coach. She is an author. We're going to speak about her book, hopefully, which has just come out recently. She is a mediator and more. So Jennifer, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
You know, I think this is such an important topic as to do you respect yourself in a lot of ways. With social media, we're losing so much of who we are to begin with. We only see a tiny little aspect of people. We get such a different view of who they are to really, who they really are. And I think sometimes we do the same with ourselves. We put ourselves out there in a very small fraction of who we really are. And I think that's something that I'm really excited to talk about, because sometimes in a marriage or any relationship or just having kids or going through life, you kind of lose a little bit of who you are. And sometimes you lose a little bit about how you treat yourself or should treat yourself. So I'm going to ask, before we kind of dive in, can you share a little bit more on your background and where your passion comes from?
So my passion really comes from the foundation of championing my own authenticity. And I think that when you say we sort of lose who we are, I would like to reframe that and say we just stop making ourselves a priority. We stop thinking about what it is that truly fills our souls. And that's a choice, right? And we forget that we are either the victims of our lives or we are the creators, right? And
Right.
so for a long time, I allowed myself to be a victim in certain situations. And I wasn't listening to my inner whispers. So one of my goals with my clients and with my children and my friends and family is to help them really dig deep and identify who they are when they are their best self. And so that's really why I do what I do. I really champion speaking your truth and listening to your inner whispers, because I believe that through that, you can have a very fulfilled life.
So you use the word inner whisper. I like that a lot. Sometimes you hear professionals say to you, what's your body telling you? Or listen to your intuition or your gut, right? So do they really speak to you?
So, it's so interesting because, as people, we are human beings, right? And there's a reason I feel that the word be is in beings, because we don't take the time, or many of us don't take the time to be still. And as Eckhart Tolle says, we don't take the time to be in the isness of now. What is. And if you allow yourself time to pause and reflect, your inner whispers will come through. Some people call it your inner GPS. Some people call it your heart star. Some people call it your gut. There are thoughts and patterns and emotions that go through us if we only take the time to listen.
Yeah, I like that. And I heard something similar to that we are called human beings, not human doings.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to get so involved in doing things that we forget to kind of be who we are sometimes, and I think from what you're saying as well, if we listen to what our body is telling us, sometimes we need a little bit of rest, a little TLC. Maybe we sometimes need to up our energy level by going out and enjoying ourselves with a fun activity, but being, as opposed to just doing. And as I say, getting caught up in that rat race. And that again comes to what we were speaking about right at the beginning there, as to, do we lose ourselves a little bit? Do we, as you put it, are we a victim of our life or are we a creator of our life? Do we just get stuck in this rut, or do we actually go out and deliberately and mindfully do things and become our creator of our life? So I think that's very, very powerful. And I've told many of my clients that, I'm not this totally cold, heartless MBA CPA. I used to, it's not a good thing, I used to kind of make fun of the whole hippie, take care of yourself, meditate kind of thought. That was my thought about 8 years ago. When I started going through my divorce, boy, was my body telling me a lot of things, right? And they were things that I did not even know existed because I'd never listened to my body. And one of the things I'm grateful for is I learned about meditation and taking care of yourself. And I do spend a few minutes every morning, every evening. And that in itself helped me kind of align with myself, if that makes sense. But I could listen to what my body was telling me. I took the time for it. And I think that's just one piece as well. And that's my dog, so I got a treat. Sorry.
Hirsch, I really like that you said, I take a few minutes, because some people, or many people, are under the impression that when you meditate, it has to be for long periods of time. I like to teach my clients that even in just taking a breath, you are meditating. And a great way to do that, and an easy way to do that, is if you imagine smelling your most favorite flower, the scent of your flower, and you breathe it in, you hold your breath for 5 seconds, and then you breathe out like you are blowing out your birthday cake. you really are stopping your thought process and giving yourself time to sort of reignite and start over or think more clearly.
I had a discussion a few months ago with somebody who was talking about this, and they said your breathing directs your energy in so many ways. If I want to slow down a little bit and I want to focus, I take these longer, slower breaths, tend to. I need a lot of energy, right? Somebody who's about to run a 100-meter sprint in the Olympics, they're not hold your breath, letting it out, right? If you watch them, they actually breathe much quicker than they usually do, but that helps with that. I'm going to focus that energy. It's got to be intense. It's got to be quick. And so just starting with something as simple as your breathing, which is from the primitive brain. I mean, it's not even something that we usually think about, but putting a little bit of mindfulness into that, all of a sudden it changes the entire action of what we're doing, which I think is pretty amazing actually in itself.
And it is, and it can start right when you wake up, right? In order to develop this respect for yourself and champion your own authenticity, you can do that first thing in the morning with a check-in. I don't know, have you ever heard of habit stacking?
I don't think I have.
Okay. So I love to use habit stacking in my practice. It's a skill I teach my clients, especially in the beginning processes of divorce, when we tend to really feel so emotional that it's hard to think about what it is that we really need in order to move forward. So habit stacking is when you stack a new habit that you want to develop, like a daily check-in, to something that you already do. So brushing your teeth is something we all do. It is a habit. People don't think about it as a habit because we just do it automatically. But it's a great time before or after you brush your teeth, or even during, to do a daily check-in. So for example, if you are going through a divorce and you need to fill out your financial affidavit. So a daily check-in might be, I'm gonna set the intention of just filling out 5 items I need to on my financial affidavit, because if I do that, I will start to feel more empowered, and it won't be as scary if I do it in small, brave bites. Okay. And likewise at night, after, while you're brushing your teeth, or after, or during, whatever you feel is easiest for you, something that you're grateful for, one thing. And going back to the finances, it could be, I filled out those 5 items on my financial affidavit, and I can do this, and I will move through this.
So I actually take a very similar approach. It's funny you say that, especially with the financial affidavit, because usually the state affidavits, and I've worked with about 15 different states, they are anywhere from 8 to about 13 pages. Yeah. And that's a daunting, when you're already emotional, already stressed, and then somebody says, oh, could you fill this out for me? And you're flipping through, and it's page after page of, so I say to them, the first thing you got to do is, I just want you to take 10 minutes and fill out the first page. And it's like 10 minutes, but it's your name, it's your address, it's, the basics, right? But just getting through that first page, you now 10 or 15% way into, right? But it only took you 10 minutes. So just a small action like that can really build the momentum that is needed. So yeah, just take a little bit at a time and then celebrate that win. I had somebody who literally was going through the divorce process for 2.5 years and had not filled out the financial affidavit. They looked at it as this big document and they couldn't get started because it was all or nothing. And I said, nope, that's not the way we're going to do it, right? So I like that. So what are some of the ways that a person can become more in tune with that inner dialogue?
Well, it's interesting that, because you just said celebrate the victory. And I think that so many of us live life on autopilot, or they say sometimes we're sleepwalking through life, that we don't take the time to celebrate our victories, right? And so, it's really important to start becoming aware of your internal dialogue, how you talk to yourself. So people don't realize that the words we use either empower us or disempower us. So I'll give you a couple examples. Going back to the financial affidavit, you have a client who says, I just can't fill it out. I just can't get started. Can't is a very disempowering word. We use it a lot. It implies a helplessness, right? Instead, an empowering alternative to can't is I won't. I won't fill this out today because I'm going to wait for Hirsch, who's going to help me fill it out tomorrow. Okay? That implies that you have a choice.
Right.
And again, that goes back to the choice point, which is what my entire practice is based on, the empowerment dynamic, which is, again, are you going to be a victim of your situation or are you going to be a creator? And when you're a victim, like in the I can't fill out my financial affidavit, you disempower yourself. Your energy gets depleted versus using an empowering word like won't, where you implies that you have a choice and that she or he will fill out the financial affidavit with you tomorrow. That is more empowering.
And I want to point out maybe the obvious in some ways, but not so obvious, is your action, or in this case, your inaction of not filling it out is identical, right? I'm sitting there, there's a document in front of me, and I'm not filling it out, whether I use the word can't, whether I use the word won't. But it's an entirely different perspective of what I'm doing, sitting there doing nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And that's pretty incredible, and I think very, very empowering in itself to be able to know you can do the same thing, but have a very different energy around it. One being very positive or the victim, and one being quite negative. One being quite positive being the creator, and one being negative being that victim, which I think is amazing. Can you talk a little bit, what are some of the other words? Are there any, like, can't is obviously in everyone's vernacular, right? Going back to that 60% statistic that I had mentioned earlier. What are some of the other ones that people should be aware of that just tend to roll off our tongue?
Well, you just used one, should. Have you ever heard of the expression, stop shoulding all over yourself?
Yes, I have actually.
So should and could, imply right or wrong, right? If something is right or wrong, you're very much in a box. So what I like to help my clients reframe is, instead of using should or could, we use the words can or could, because when you can do something, it implies ownership, right. It implies that you have flexibility, you have grit, you have the willingness and the determination to achieve something. So should is a word that we really want to become aware of and start using can or could. The other one that I often find in the divorce process is the difference between try and commit. So I might be working on a skill, or let's just go back to the financial affidavit. An assignment I might give a client is, by the time we meet next week, fill out the second page. If you have any questions, you can call me. And the client will say, I'll try to do that. Well, try is a disempowering word. What word could you use, which I just gave you, that would be more empowering, and it sort of triggers something physiologically which helps you move forward, right? And that's the job of a coach, to bridge where you are now to where you want to be, and that gap in the middle. So I will commit to doing that one page. And if I have any questions, I'll circle them, or I'll text you to see where I might find that document or what I need to do to complete the page. So try versus commit. Another one that you hear frequently is always and never. Always and never are very position-based.
Okay.
Can you think of what might be the opposite that would be more empowering than always or never?
You're putting me on the spot
Okay,
here.
I'll tell you. When you're on the spot, it's hard to think. So sometimes,
I was thinking sometimes, yeah.
or often, okay? And with the word never, seldom would be a more empowering word to use, because the truth is, and somebody might refute this, but no one is always something, right?
Yeah.
There's often, and see, I do it, but I catch myself,
Right.
you know. We have to give room for improvement. We have to give room for a path to be able to change. And using always and never are words that incite people, particularly during conflict and divorce.
So, it's amazing, because one of the things that I know when I'm speaking to one of my clients is, if they are frequently using absolutes like never or always,
Mm-hmm.
that it's going to be a harder client to work with, because they've already almost taken a position mentally. They may not always realize it, but they've often taken a position. He would never do that. She would never do that, meaning in a compromise situation. Well, you've already set up the situation in your mind. So what you're saying is hitting home very hard right now, because I've seen that with my clients as well, as to leaving the door open, whether it's for negotiation, whether it's for you to be flexible, whatever it might be. But I think that in itself helps you in your reasonableness in going through the process, which sometimes it's hard to do, especially if you're hurt, or especially if you're very emotional and scared. So I think all amazing things. And yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things that you just said, they might not realize it. And so this is what one important element of partnering with a divorce coach is about, is understanding what your communication skills are, understanding your conflict management strategies, because there's a framework called the 3 A's framework of how you move through challenging situations. And, it's so important, because if you're able to sort of have the awareness, that's where the key is to change. If you do not realize that you're using disempowering words, or you're, like always and never, then it's very hard to move through change. So the first step is understanding and becoming aware. That's the first A. The second A is accepting that you use disempowering words and you want to make that change. And the third A is action. Awareness, acceptance, action. And you saw before how I caught myself using the word always, because I practice. I practice being mindful of the words I use to either disempower me or empower me.
And being aware, I think, is so important. And all too often we're not aware, because something that happened to me, I'm talking probably 20 years ago, and I still catch myself doing it, even though I'm aware. I find it's very comfortable to, cross my arms. Mm-hmm. And I would sit in a meeting and I would cross my arms, or, and people would be like, "You're a really nice guy, but you've always got this negative body language." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Right? I had no idea. But when you close yourself off physically, that is negative body language. And the more you become aware, so I always try to keep my hands to my side, or, something like that, because I'm always trying to be more aware of that. And it's a difficult one to change a habit that you've been in for 10 years, 20 years, sometimes 50 or 60 years, depending on how long you've been doing it. And we will have to take a break right now and come back.
Okay.
I have a lot more questions for you, and I'm looking forward to getting into them. So we will be back with Jennifer Warren Medwin in about 2 minutes. Please stay here and listen to the rest of the show. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. I have Jennifer Warren Medwin with me today, and we are talking about, do you respect yourself? Learning some of the positives and the negatives that we're not even aware of how we treat ourselves. And I think awareness becomes so important in what we do. And like all other shows, I like to recap the show as to what we've covered so far. And I've got a whole list down here. So I'm going to run through them real quickly. The first one that we kind of said was we should have Aretha Franklin playing in the background, but that your body speaks to you all the time. And sometimes it's, probably just walking down the street. Sometimes it's sitting and contemplating something. But listen to those, as you said, Jennifer, inner whispers, which I liked. You also mentioned about being the victim or being the creator of your life, which I think sometimes we default ourselves into one and then we forget that there is a choice to be the other, which I thought was so important. Becoming more in tune with yourself, your inner dialogue, what your body's telling you and what you're telling yourself even, how we disempower ourselves and how we're not even cognizant of it, and the ways that we can catch ourselves with, I think I'd say, small tweaks even that can have such a powerful impact on us, as opposed to being absolute and coming across potentially as rigid. Being able to leave that door open just by changing some of that wording and some of the vernacular that we use. Identifying them, I think, as well, whether it's, as mindful. We spoke about meditating, contemplating, thinking through your day, thinking through how did things go and how could they be different, to just even being aware as a word comes out of your mouth that it's going to change kind of the action that follows it very often. So I think a lot of great things that we discussed there. And talking about, do we respect ourselves? Often people are saying, be gentle, be good to yourself, things like that. What are some of the big mistakes that people need to avoid when going through this process? Because it is a transition that they need to be aware of and that they need to move forward with. So what are some of those important mistakes they should try to avoid?
Well, I want to say you used a word, need, right? And need is a disempowering word if it is not based on our basic needs as human beings: food, shelter, water, air. Okay. So the empowering word for need would be to want, right? Or I choose to do something. So one of the things that I wanted to say, and I wanted to acknowledge this with you, because you were talking about how you realize that sometimes in meetings you cross your arms and it sends the wrong message, right? That you're closed and not open. So being able to acknowledge that you're doing that is so great, right? Because that is a third of the way there to changing the action. And so you asked me about mistakes, and what I wanted to say or ask you is, when you catch yourself crossing your arms, do you shame yourself because you're crossing your arms, like in your internal dialogue, or do you act as your own cheerleader and say, good job, Hirsch, you noticed that, and so now you're going to change your action, and that's great, because the next time maybe you won't do it as often, because the more you practice something, the better you become.
Right.
And so what is that inner dialogue when you do make mistakes, when you notice yourself not performing up to your ability, right? Where is there shame or is there encouragement?
Right. So firstly, to answer your question, I'm not sure. I know I don't berate myself, but I don't know that I kind of celebrate. Oh, look, you recognize that, and there's somebody who's actually been on my show. I've worked with him in a couple of capacities and is somewhat of a friend of mine who I really like, Kevin Adley. He is a very avid mountain climber. And his attitude, his goal is basically to climb, the top peak in all of, they call it the 7-on-7, basically, the 7 tallest peaks on the 7 continents. And his attitude is, I never fail. I either succeed or I learn. And I think what you're saying drives that a lot. I think that's a very powerful statement, actually, as to, things didn't go the way I wanted them. Do I claim them in the victim role, like we were speaking about, or do I make it something that I can actually create something new and something positive out of, even though it wasn't the ending that I wanted up front? So I think that is a very important thing. And we've kind of spoken all around this. I'm going to get a very direct question on this. I know that you help people and have created 4 strategies that people can implement to develop a more positive vernacular. So share a little bit more on that, if you would.
Okay. I always find that when you can develop strategies that can be easily remembered by people, they can stop in their reaction or response, whether it's to something they do or something else someone else does. And before I give you the 4 strategies, I'm just going to tell you about a formula that my clients, it's not my own framework, but it's something that I use in my life and I have taught my clients. It's E plus R equals O. So E stands for the event, whatever the event is. R is how you react and respond to it. And O is the outcome. So the event can be bankruptcy. It could be divorce. Okay. How you react or respond to the event has an impact on the outcome. Okay. So it's really important in that reaction and response that we take that time to really think about how we want to bridge the gap between where we are now and where we want to be. Okay, so
Plus, here I would just add, if you're reacting to somebody else, you've now got another whole dynamic in there of how are they going to respond back and what are you generating in them. But
exactly.
Didn't mean to interrupt, but that's important.
And it is important because if how you react and respond says whether you are in control of yourself or not. Right. Are you adding to the conflict or you creating some dissipation, right? So here are the 4 strategies. 1 is to be present, to set the intention of being present. Okay. Meaning if you do something that you're not proud of, if you make a mistake, there it is again, always, you have to be careful myself. There are frequently messages in the mess. Okay. And how we talk to ourselves in this time really matters. So it's important to be present, meaning not to rehash what has taken place and not to forecast what might happen, to be here in this moment. Practice is the second strategy. So be present is the first, practice is the second. Habit stacking, creating a new habit so that you can move through any situation. For example, if we're focusing on respect, okay, creating more respect in our lives, what affirmations could you use in the morning to create a habit of respect for yourself? Okay. The third strategy is shift. Okay. When you catch yourself using disempowering words, when you catch yourself crossing your arms if you're in a meeting or in the midst of a conflict, how can you refocus? How can you reframe? What words can you use to sort of direct yourself in a positive, uplifting manner? Okay, so we have be present, practice, shift, and the last one is focus on the benefits of the behaviors and the words you are using every day. Okay, use the self-talk. Be your own best champion.
Right. So I got to tell you, I have about 20 more questions for you, and we have about 5 more minutes. So we're going to touch on a couple because I do want to focus most of this time relating to your book and working with people. So there is a question, though, that we've spoken about a little that I do want to touch on, and that is using the word perfect is a setup. And you could almost say it's the perfect setup in some ways. But explain a little bit more why the word perfect is a setup.
Okay. And it is so interesting because it is a word that is used frequently by individuals.
Right.
The reason perfect is a setup is because it is not attainable. So what I usually ask my clients, what is perfect? Give me one example of something that is perfect.
Interesting. Yeah.
Hirsch, can you, I mean, I haven't found it yet. That doesn't mean that what is perfect? And so
It isn't. You're right.
there isn't. And why this word was created, I don't know. And yet we can choose to be victimized by that word, or we can be the creator of that word and understand that good enough is good enough, right? And
Right.
that if we're aiming for perfection, how do we ever know when we get there, right? And part of having respect for yourself is acknowledging when you have succeeded. And in order to succeed, there has to be something that can validate your success.
Right.
Perfection, if there is no such thing, how do we succeed? So it's a word that I strongly encourage individuals to eliminate from their vocabulary.
Very powerful. And we use it all the time in even simple instances that
Mm-hmm.
I'll meet you there at 8:00 tonight. Perfect. Right.
And also, here's another one. Practice makes perfect. No.
Right.
Practice makes better.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's great. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I want to talk a little bit about your book. They say that everyone has a book in them. You've just put one out on the bookshelf, which is amazing. I'm going to ask you to share a little bit more about it, the motivation behind it, what people should be able to take away from it, and equally or more important, how do people actually get a copy of it?
So the book is called Strategies and Tips from a Divorce Coach, a Roadmap to Move Forward. And it is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The reason I created it is because divorce coaching is a relatively new profession. It wasn't until 2013 that the American Bar Association defined divorce coaching as the fourth element of the process. And my own personal goal is to help redefine the divorce process and to help individuals who are contemplating, going through, or starting a new chapter after divorce do so in a healthy, productive, efficient, and amicable way. And so I wrote this book with that intention in mind. And it describes, it talks about the divorce coaching industry and why it's so important to have a divorce coach on your team, as well as the 4 quadrants of divorce: the emotional side, the organizational piece, the financial piece, and the legal piece. There are a plethora of checklists, for example, what to put in a parenting plan, what financial documents you are going to use. I worked with a lot of the most well-known professionals in the industry for this book. And the second half, and probably my favorite part, is our self-help strategies to lean into the uncertainty of the divorce process and really life in general, right? We think we have certainty, but we live every second in uncertainty, and learning how to lean into it. So it's helpful for people who are not even going through divorce, but just going through challenges in their lives.
And one of the things I love, I mean, especially in the divorce side, it's a very personal life cycle that we go through. But I think in general, one of the big fears that people have is the unknown. Mm-hmm. And so being able to understand what's to come, what to expect a little bit, even though you got to make it, it's going to be personal how it impacts you. I think having that roadmap is such an important piece to it all. I think that's huge.
It really is.
So, Jen, before we wrap up, I'm going to ask, how can people get in touch with you? And obviously, I'm assuming that with that, they'll be able to get a copy or at least a link to the book as well.
Sure. My website is seekingempowerment.com. And I'm on social media as well, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Seeking Empowerment. And they can always email me with any questions at jen@seekingempowerment.com.
And I just want to add to that. I think definitely go to the website, seekingempowerment.com. There's just so much there. And I just want to add, I think Jennifer brings so much to the table because she is a certified divorce coach. She has gone through the training of mediation, which being a mediator myself, I understand the huge misconceptions of what a mediator does and what the process does. Mm-hmm. So bringing those two disciplines and now having researched with multiple disciplines to get the book out brings a very, very unique and very in-depth perception of what somebody can go through and what they need. So I definitely encourage you, go to the website, see the resources, the blogs there, get a copy of the book. I think all of it is very, very important. And Jennifer, thank you for shedding light on, I think something I think everybody really struggles with, to be honest. You know, we only get one chance at life, right? And we want to have the best life we can. And treating yourself with respect is just such an important piece of that. So thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me too.
Absolutely.
And yourself.
I'm looking forward to you being on again. So I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. Please reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. You can reach out to me with questions for myself or for Jennifer Warren Medwin, our guest today. Thank you, CC Schatz, for putting everything together behind the scenes and making it all happen. And I really enjoyed our conversation. Please join me for my next show and have a great week.